Hey guys, this is Formaltality, moderator of Dianamains subreddit. Today we are taking a look at reworked Diana's strengths, and just sort of all of her possible new rune choices, what pathways open up because of the rework, do builds change, just some generally frequently asked questions about the champion that are going to pop up post-rework. So there's a couple of things to keep in mind. The first thing to keep in mind is she has earlier access to power spikes. So she's no longer a champion that relies on getting level 6 solely. She can in fact pressure something before level 6 and have some sort of lane agency to help her jungler in skirmishes, etc. So if we take a look at what's changed in her kit, her attack speed is now flat across the board, so auto attacks feel much better to use early game. This is level 5, no additional attack speed items, runes, etc. This feels really good to use compared to what it was on live, where I would say it's comparable with like a Janna auto attack. If you use an ability, the attack speed bonus she gets triples. That's pretty good. Early game, her W has a 15-second cooldown. This is an important thing to keep in mind because you can no longer brainlessly shove waves with W level 1. So in most matchups, you're going to opt to start Q now. Q is going to be better wave clear, better poke, and you'll just have to stand back and accept you won't win some of the trades. W will have to be used more reactively when an enemy champion trades into you rather than proactively to shove waves and use the shield to mitigate damage, because the uptime on it is severely lowered, which I think was a good balance change for her. That way she just doesn't constantly shove in waves all the time. With the passive damage also being lowered, this means she has lower effective wave clear early game, so she takes more time to shove in waves, and this is overall a pretty good change, considering she now has access to her mobility earlier through Lunar Rush. Now, Lunar Rush does little to no damage now. This is a 1-point wonder. At rank 1, you're dealing 40 damage plus 40% of your AP. So it's very little damage. You should only put 1 point into this and max your W second. Your ult is now Moonfall. So with it being Moonfall, it still has the benefit of having CC, but in addition to that, it pulls enemies in and has a damage delay. So what this means is Diana now has delayed burst within her kit, which is definitely more healthy than just smacking everybody with EWQ passive like she would on the live servers. She could literally just ult in, WQ passive all at once and unload an unhealthy amount of damage on a group of targets. Now, she has to hit multiple people with her ult to get similar damage levels off. I would argue higher damage levels. The more people she hits, the more damage it does. You can also use this knowledge to where if you E forward, get a large pull off, and then E into one person, it's going to deal additional damage. So it's a cool little trick if you're looking to isolate a squishy off the map. Alright, in this next section we're going to take a look at which runes are most viable on her. We have Electrocute for the first rune. So with the Electrocute page, it's pretty much the same for the primary domination tree. You go Electrocute, Sudden Impact, Eyeball Collection, and Relentless Hunter. You can also choose any of these other keystones on the bottom row here. If you don't prefer the out-of-combat movement speed for quicker roams, you can go Ravenous Hunter for better 1v1s, Ultimate Hunter if you want your ultimate to be up on a cooldown more quickly, Ingenious Hunter if you prefer working with active items. This is something I've seen Korean players do with the Phase Rush builds, and I'll talk about that in the other rune choices here in just a minute. So then we go over to Sorcery. This is where your options vary a little bit. Diana's more CDR focused, so Transcendence is generally considered the better option in my opinion now. You can also easily cap over the 40% CDR, so you can get like 20 AP off of it pretty easy, plus blue buff would give you another 40. And that puts you above the amount that Absolute Focus grants. The only difference is Absolute Focus will definitely be easier to keep up in the earlier stages of the game, but your health isn't going to always be at this threshold. And I think it's better to guarantee that you will always have access to that damage than lose out on it. So Transcendence wins my vote here. For the bottom row, you can choose any of these 3 runes here. Some people prefer the Scaling and Gathering Storm, Water Walking to rotate quicker. To your jungler, Diana has actual early pressure now since she has access to her dash, so this is a really good rune to take now. Scorch, if you need some extra poke on your Q, I see that some people prefer to take this one. I see some players like Diana 2, for example, taking it. And then your bottom stat shards are pretty much the same. Double AP, and then optional at the bottom here. So let's take a look at the next rune tree, which is going to be Phase Rush. And I didn't update it, so let me change it over. So you take Phase Rush in the Sorcery tree. Mana Flow Band is very nice to give you some extra mana. This is good in matchups where you're against heavy magic damage. And we also have the same choices as earlier. So typically I go with something like this or this. And then for your secondaries, this is based on what Korean players have run previously. I see them go Sudden Impact and Ingenious Hunter for lower active item cooldowns. They take Proto and Zhonya's. And the closer you get the Zhonya's to your ultimate cooldown, the more uptime you'll have on it, on your engages, since you rely on Zhonya's quite a bit now. It's really nice to have. You can also go Shield Bash and Revitalize for some extra shield damage and shielding potential. So again, preference. If you're looking to be a little bit safer in lane while also trading back with higher shield, with your shield being a little bit higher, thus proccing Shield Bash, then this might be for you as well. So all depends on playstyle and preference. Stat shards are the same, double adaptive force, and then your choice on the bottom row here. So with Conqueror, you take Conqueror in the Precision tree. You can choose these 2 runes right here, whichever you'd prefer. Presence of Mind is good to give you some extra mana, and mana back from an all-in. Alacrity is good to give you some attack speed. You can also choose Tenacity. I don't recommend stacking the Tenacity boots with Alacrity or Tenacity, sorry, unless it's an absolute emergency. It's usually better to just get one or the other, and then you can reap the benefits of having the additional attack speed. And then on your bottom rune here, Coup de Grace procs the most consistently, so just pick this for consistency. Secondary tree, so Shield Bash and Revitalize, of course, to give your shield some extra strength, and Revitalize just to give you some extra damage. For runes, you can take some attack speed if you want. I know some people prefer the attack speed early game to help proc their Conqueror quickly, but Diana already stacks it up pretty quick, so this is usually unnecessary, and I find the double adaptive to be better overall. So for this last section, we'll take a look at builds. There's some new items that Diana can build, or maybe she could have built them before, but they're more viable and seem more necessary now. For example, Rowan Nashor's is going to make a natural resurgence since she has the incentive to build HP now, with the percent HP ratio added on her W, and this will definitely offset the loss in base shielding that she loses from the nerf that she received on her shield. So this is definitely a good pickup now if you like Bruiser Diana. Nashor's Tooth, she has better attack speed across the board, so this is good if you want to weave more auto attacks in. Her passive damage may have been reduced overall, but this definitely feels a lot nicer since her attack speed scales more naturally, and it doesn't feel as clunky anymore. Proto Belt is a good first pickup as well because it again offsets the W nerf that you receive on the base shielding. Luden's Echo is good on assassin builds now. You get 20% cooldown reduction, 90 mana, or 90 ability power, sorry, and 600 mana. And you get some extra poke before all in. CDR is super important on Diana now, so Luden's Echo I believe is going to be the way to go for assassin builds, at least as a rush item, mainly because of the CDR. Lichbane is also an item you can now consider to offset some of your passive damage loss, and also she feels better to weave autos in with now, so this is naturally just going to be a better pickup. It's going to feel nicer. GLP is something Koreans played before, and I can see this being picked up again, just to keep everybody within your slow zone after your initial pull-in, or just to help catch somebody off for a QR combo, or not QR. Guys, I'm living in the past still. A QE combo and ulting them in. So it'll be a lot easier to land your Qs and then E into them. So let's talk about must-have items now. So we've got Zhonya's Hourglass and Deathcap. Deathcap is needed to scale and keep you relevant still, but I no longer see this as a second or first item purchase. Zhonya's Hourglass is definitely more necessary now because you have that 1 second delay before your damage falls off, so it feels more important to have early on. I would at least say the stopwatch component needs to be finished before you go into Deathcap. And maybe you look to use stopwatch at a key fight, so you can build Deathcap at a second item possibly. But I don't see it working in every single game now. You're going to have stopwatch somewhere in there for a key team fight. Otherwise you just get blown up. Since you can't really take Aftershock anymore because of the high ult cooldown. So let's take a look at the Assassin build now. CDR is extremely important, and Zhonya's is also critical, as I've discussed a few times. With the Ludens, we're obviously purchasing that for more mana, more CDR, and more AP. I wouldn't necessarily say the mana's even needed from the Ludens, but just the CDR and ability power is nice, and then the added extra bit of damage you get from the passive on Ludens is really nice as well. So Ludens, Source Shoes, and Oblivion Orb. Double Pen is still very good, although it is more expensive to pull the combo off. If you can reliably do it early game, I suggest doing so, just to get a lot of extra damage in. Zhonya's Hourglass, of course, is going to become more necessary because we need to survive. At least get a stopwatch for a key team fight, and then go into Rabadon's Deathcap so you can remain relevant through scaling. These two, again, can be switched interchangeably. It depends. So it depends on a few things. It depends on team comp and other factors. I would say the Zhonya's Hourglass is the safest rush, though, unless they have a ton of AP and the damage isn't up front. And it's more spread out over time, so you can easily get your ult off. And then, of course, we take Void Staff as sort of a late game item, just to stop any bruisers that are building a ton of MR. You can also add Lichbane to this as well, and replace this item right here, if you choose to do so. That's definitely a viable option too. Lichbane gives you a ton of extra damage on your auto attacks, and it puts you at the CDR cap as well. And with Transcendence, you'll be able to exceed that and gain some additional AP. Although this is extremely expensive, so I would usually just recommend doing the double pen and then replacing it with the Lichbane later on in the game. Unless they have a lot of healing, then of course pick up a Morellonomicon. So now let's take a look at the Bruiser build. So the Bruiser build is still Rowan Asher's. It's just a lot better now, since she gains access to Conqueror earlier on, and can stack it up really quickly with the better attack speed. Next, you do want to consider Zhonya's if you're going for Rowan Asher's. Zhonya's because you need some resistances to pair with your health, and to help you survive after using your ultimate during an all-in. If you're against an AP champion mid, you might consider just switching over to the Deathcap, because you'll have enough health to survive an all-in generally with just the Rowan Asher's. I still like Zhonya's just because of the active and how it has good synergy with her new ult. Deathcap to remain relevant in scaling, of course, and then Void Staff. If you need to shred through tanks, Rowan Asher's your passive and Void Staff. Easy, easy, easy to get tanks with this item. So next let's look at the Korean Phase Rush build. So the Korean Phase Rush build is pretty much unchanged. It's Hextech Proto Belt and Zhonya's Hourglass paired together with the Ingenious Hunters, so you have lower overall item cooldowns. Deathcaps so you don't fall off a cliff in damage. Lichbane also built so you don't fall off a cliff in terms of damage. Oblivion Orb can be considered in this build as well for double penetration, just to help you out with damage. But you can also replace this item with the Void Staff if needed. For this last section, we're going to look at some other Korean builds here. This one's going to be either Phase Rush or Electrocute. So with this one, you can take Hextech GLP. It does scale better than Luden's overall. It has higher AP ratio scaling and a higher base damage scaling. It does arguably have a higher cooldown though, since you can technically restack Luden's quicker, I guess. This is used to land QE combos easier. And overall, it's just a good tool for catching people out. You still don't take Glacial Augment with this. You just take the normal either Burst Runes through Electrocute, or you can take Phase Rush with it. Personally, I think I'd prefer Electrocute, but this is a really cheap item, and it allows you to catch people out pretty easy. You can also cap through the CDR limit pretty easily with this, Hourglass, and either Nashor's or Lichbane. One of the two, you can pick one. So it allows you to scale beyond the AP threshold with Transcendence pretty easy. Build order. This will be your core item and first item, followed by Sorc Shoes. This item will be next, so you can survive all lens easier. This so you remain relevant in damage. You can do these two interchangeably. Lichbane if they're not building MR, Void Staff if they are building MR, or you think they will build MR soon. So these last two items are your preference. You can also switch to a Nashor's Tooth if you'd like. If you'll be maybe dueling a tank or something, but that's super situational. And usually Lichbane will be better for getting off the empowered auto attacks. As for the old burst build, I could still see it potentially working, but CDR is so important with only 10% being available now. It'll definitely make it less effective because you need CDR to get your ult up quicker, and your cooldowns are scaling lower overall, such as your W and your E, so CDR becomes a lot more important. So this can be done, but I don't see it being the absolute go-to for every single build. Simply because, again, you need that cooldown reduction to cycle through your abilities more effectively, and not just cycling through your abilities so you can gain access to your ultimate more often. Diana's kind of shifted into a team fight, Mage Assassin Bruiser thing. She's more team fight oriented than she was pick oriented. So she looks for a good opening to go into team fights. Think of it like Orianna ult or Malphite ult. You're looking for the right timing to hit your ult with Diana, basically. And that's kind of what her identity is. She still has the sustained damage with her auto attacks, in the split push potential. Like, none of that's changed, and in fact feels better because of her auto attack speed being normalized through her passive now. Her more effective role now is she's better in team fights. So that's all the tips and tricks that I have for now. If you guys have any questions, just let me know in the Reddit thread, and